A kitchen can cost a fortune and still look cheap. And the strangest part is, you may not even realize why. It might be the cabinets, the lighting, the island, the backsplash, or one tiny detail you barely notice every day that quietly makes the entire room feel unfinished. Because an expensive kitchen isn't created by throwing expensive materials at it, it's created by avoiding the wrong decisions. So let's look at the kitchen mistakes that can make even a beautiful home feel strangely ordinary. And some of them are far more ridiculous than you'd expect. One of the biggest offenders is the empty space above your cabinets. You know the one. The cabinets stop short of the ceiling, leaving that awkward strip of wall above them. At first, it seems harmless. But visually, it creates a hard stopping point that can make the ceiling feel lower and the kitchen feel less intentional. And then there's what happens up there. Dust, grease, random decorations nobody really wanted. That empty space becomes a permanent shelf for things you rarely use and don't particularly enjoy cleaning. If your cabinets can't reach the ceiling, you don't necessarily need to replace the entire kitchen. Crown molding, a properly finished panel, or a built-in extension can make the transition look intentional. The goal isn't simply to hide the gap. It's to make the cabinets look like they belong to the architecture. But there's another mistake that can make a kitchen look cheap, even when everything is technically expensive. Trying too hard to make everything match. For years, the safe formula was simple: white cabinets, white counters, white backsplash, black hardware. It looked clean. It photographed beautifully. And then everyone started doing it. The problem isn't white. The problem is when every surface has the same visual temperature and nothing gives the eye somewhere to rest. A kitchen can actually look more expensive when different materials quietly balance each other. Warm wood against stone. Soft whites against darker accents. A little variation in metal finishes. Subtle texture instead of 5 different patterns competing for attention. Luxury often looks less like matching and more like coordination. Then we come to the kitchen island. People love islands so much that sometimes they forget an island is supposed to help the kitchen, not conquer it. An enormous island can turn a spacious kitchen into an obstacle course. You walk around it. Someone opens the dishwasher. Someone else opens the refrigerator. Now nobody can move. On the other hand, a tiny island that barely fits a cutting board can become an expensive piece of furniture sitting in the middle of the room for no reason. Before building one, tape its footprint onto the floor. Walk around it. Open imaginary cabinet doors. Pretend you're carrying a hot pan from the stove to the sink. If the island constantly gets in your way, the problem isn't that the kitchen needs a bigger island. It may need a smaller one, or none at all. And then there's lighting, one of the easiest ways to make an expensive kitchen feel like a commercial building. A ceiling full of bright recessed lights doesn't automatically create a sophisticated space. In fact, when every light comes straight down from above, the kitchen can become harsh and flat. Good kitchen lighting works in layers. You want general illumination. You want focused light where you actually prepare food. And you want softer lighting that creates atmosphere when you're not cooking. Under-cabinet lighting can make countertops easier to work on. A well-chosen pendant can give the island a focal point. Warm light can make wood, stone, and paint colors feel completely different from the same materials under cold, clinical lighting. And this leads to another mistake people often make without realizing it. Buying appliances first and figuring out the kitchen around them later. That is how you end up with a refrigerator sticking awkwardly beyond the cabinets, strange filler gaps, or a microwave sitting permanently on the countertop. Nothing makes a kitchen look unfinished faster than poor proportions. The solution is simple in theory. Design the space around the appliances instead of squeezing appliances into whatever space remains. Measure everything, not approximately. Everything. Because an appliance that's only a few inches too deep can disrupt the entire visual line of a kitchen. But appearance isn't the only problem. Poor planning can also make a kitchen frustrating to use. Imagine standing at the refrigerator, walking across the room to the sink, then crossing back toward the stove. Again, and again, and again. A beautiful kitchen with terrible movement is still a bad kitchen. The classic work triangle between the refrigerator, sink, and cooking area exists for a reason. Kitchens work better when the most important destinations are reasonably connected. You shouldn't have to cross the entire room just to grab something you use every 30 seconds. And sometimes, the biggest mistake isn't the layout at all. It's choosing materials that scream a particular era. Remember when certain granite patterns were everywhere? Or when every surface needed to look glossy? Or when dramatic veining became so popular that countertops started competing with themselves? Trends aren't automatically bad. The problem comes when a permanent and expensive feature is chosen purely because it is fashionable right now. Countertops are difficult to replace. Cabinets aren't exactly disposable. A light fixture or cabinet handle is much easier to change. So if you want to experiment with trends, experiment where replacement is easy. Use personality in the details. Let the permanent elements remain more timeless. Then there's open shelving. It looks incredible in photographs. Perfect dishes, perfect bowls, perfectly arranged decorative objects. Then real life happens. A coffee mug doesn't match. Someone drops a plate. Grease reaches the shelf. Dust settles on everything. And suddenly your beautiful minimalist display requires constant maintenance. Open shelving isn't automatically wrong. A small section can look fantastic. But when an entire kitchen depends on perfectly organized shelves staying perfect every day, you're designing for the photograph instead of the person who actually lives there. And perhaps the most underrated mistake is the backsplash. A backsplash that stops awkwardly above the counter can make an otherwise expensive kitchen feel incomplete. But going too far in the opposite direction can create another problem. Too much visual competition. If the countertop already has dramatic movement, an extremely busy backsplash may create chaos instead of sophistication. Usually, one element should take the lead. Let the countertop make the statement and keep the backsplash quieter, or make the backsplash the feature and allow the countertop to support it. The final mistake might be the smallest one, but you touch it every single day. Hardware. You can spend thousands on beautiful cabinets and then attach cheap, flimsy handles that immediately change how the entire kitchen feels. Hardware is essentially the jewelry of the room. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It just needs to feel intentional, substantial, and appropriate for the design. And here's the bigger lesson behind all of these mistakes. A kitchen doesn't look expensive because every object inside it is expensive. It looks expensive when everything appears to have been chosen for a reason. The lighting works with the materials. The cabinets work with the ceiling. The island works with the room. The appliances fit the proportions. The layout makes sense. And the details don't fight for attention. That's why the most impressive kitchen isn't always the one with the largest island, the most dramatic countertop, or the most expensive appliances. Sometimes it's the quieter kitchen, the one that simply works. Because when you remove the visual clutter, fix the awkward proportions, improve the lighting, and stop chasing every passing trend, something interesting happens. The kitchen starts looking expensive without trying to prove that it is. And maybe that's the real secret nobody tells you. Luxury isn't always about adding more. Sometimes, it comes from knowing exactly what to leave out.